Oh. Okay, welcome everybody. We've got Michael here from New Zealand, James Butler, the cricket budget from England. Full house today. Welcome to the podcast. Thank you for joining. My name's Lucas, aka 3 Point Spanish King, and we're here to review the first Test match between England and New Zealand at Lords. And boy, what a Test match this was! Short Test match. Only 3 days, but boy, there was full of excitement. And we'll start with Michael. New Zealand won the toss. They decided to bat first, and they got along a very poor start, Michael. In fact, one stage looking at probably, if they're going to get past 60 or 70. Thoughts on that first innings?
Look, I think it was one of those cases where in New Zealand, we often talk about a fake green pitch where it's green and it looks like it's going to go all over the place and it just goes straight through and it's just easy to bat on. And this was kind of the opposite. It looked like it was a batting deck. You got out there and the ball was moving just enough to get from the middle to the edge. It wasn't moving enough to get from the middle past the edge. So you saw almost no plays and misses. You saw guys just edging it and getting out. And it was almost the perfect bowling pitch because of that. England bowled really, really well, and New Zealand didn't bat so well. And as a result, they were 4 down for 7 or something. And it was really only a very spirited fight back that stopped New Zealand from challenging the 26 that we can't wait. And we've been waiting for a long time for someone to take out that record off our hands, and we didn't want it to be us. And it looked like it was a possibility for a while. Look, these guys know how to bowl in these conditions, and they did really well. And I think for everything you can say bad about the batting, there was more positives from the bowling side of things than there were negatives from the batting, from where I was watching.
Yes, you mentioned that New Zealand were 4 for 12, 5 for 27, and there were 7 for 45. Would have been a lot worse. Having said that, there was fight back from Tim Southee and Colin de Grandhomme, who did have a little resistance and made the target at least a little bit respectful, as it could have been.
Yeah, and look, that's it's good to see from Colin de Grandhomme because he's tended to score his runs when. They've been bully runs so far. It's when a team's been, under pressure. He comes in at 300 for 4 or 300 for 5 with the bowlers tired, and he hits a quick 100 or a quick 60 or 70 and demoralises the team. That's what he's been really good at. What he hasn't been so good at is coming in when New Zealand's in trouble and scoring runs, and he did that. So that was a really good sign. Ended up not out. Maybe he should have done a better job of working with the tail. He's often not batting with the tail because when domestic cricket, he bats at number 4 and he gets out pretty quickly with a decent score. But he's someone that's more interested in scoring runs than batting time. So he doesn't get to bat with the tail very often. And that's perhaps something he needs to reflect on, that he needed to be shielding Bolt and Patel from the strike a bit more. But overall, a pretty good fight back after a terrible start. But you've got to say, opening batsmen shouldn't be playing with hard hands outside the line of off stump. If you're defending a ball and a moving pitch against swing bowling, you should be using soft hands. And Will Young certainly needs to go and reflect on his defensive technique more so than. But in saying that, it was outstanding bowling, and good bowling gets wickets early on, no matter how good the batsmen are.
And we'll speak about that bowling. We'll bring in James here. My goodness, what a debut for Matt Potts. 4 for 13, 4 maidens. Unbelievable, along with James Anderson. How do you see those two in particular?
Yeah, I mean, a lot of talk. We've talked on this podcast about the structure of English cricket, and there's too many counties, and teams like Durham should be axed from the schedule. But shows that they are producing, genuine talent. Matty Potts has been terrific in the first couple of months of the county championship, 35 wickets for Durham. And it's good to pick a player for his debut when he's actually on form and he's got some confidence behind him. Too often England, Harry Brook is a potential example of that. He's absolutely in scintillating form in the early part of this season. They'll wait to pick him until he's out of form. But they picked Matty Potts when he's got his tail up. He's obviously a county colleague of Ben Stokes, so he knows the skipper and trusts the skipper, and the skipper knows him. And he couldn't have done any more. 4 for 13 on his debut at Lords. A big occasion for anybody making your debut, but at Lords as well, in front of a full house. You can't knock him. And it must be some experience for him. Being a youngster, bowling in that England lineup, probably got his call up because there's so many injuries elsewhere in the England bowling attack. But to be bowling alongside Stuart Broad and Jimmy Anderson and taking 4 for 13, it's probably a day he's going to remember for a while, isn't it?
Yes. And the other bowler, Jimmy Anderson, does it once again at age 50, 60. We don't know how old he is. He's been playing cricket for as long as the Stone Ages. Comes in, didn't play in the Caribbean. Huge question marks of whether he'll either play again. Comes in, and boy, he was just as good. 4 for 66, 6 maidens. Fantastic spell of bowling from James Anderson.
Yeah, he's a youngster that's worth persevering with, I think, in that England side. You know what you're going to get with Jimmy, especially the first innings. He does tail off a little bit these days in the second innings, but in the first innings of a test match, when he's got the ball, as Michael was saying, doing a little bit, he's got it on a string, and he would test anybody. However good you are as a batsman, they're going to have to battle to get through a Jimmy Anderson spell, and absolutely bang on the money. And I think, Lucas, once New Zealand had been bowled out for 132, and we'll come on to it in a second, but England had got off to a half-decent start. The Brendan McCullum to be knighted, Ben Stokes the best captain in the world, who needs Joe Root as skipper, England are the best team in the world, everything was going right, wasn't it?
Well, let's bring on Ashes 2023 then. Why wait until then? Why let's just call him in there this year, and we'll fix that up very quickly.
It has to be said that that joyful feeling on day one didn't last very long, because New Zealand bounced back very quickly, didn't they? Yes.
We'll start with you. Of course, New Zealand got bowled out for 132. England's first innings. Very good start, James. Surprising start. A lot of tension with Zach Crawley. Again, has been making runs. We've covered this in domestic county cricket. Comes back in. I said to you, this is really, the batting lineup's not much different compared to Caribbean and the Ashes. They had a really good start. Went to 60. That's a good start by England these days. And then absolutely the collapse came, James, and I was absolutely laughing my head off, I have to admit. I could not believe what I was seeing. Awful dread.
You were supporting New Zealand, Lucas, were you?
Well, from that supporting England, the old enemy, you got to be kidding me, James. That's just sacrilegious. That I might have the old readers cricket ball here, but it's only because New Zealand play the Kookaburra that I've got a cricket ball of them. But as I said, just a horrible collapse, expected collapse. Johnny Bairstow, Root, Ollie Pope at 3 didn't work, and just pathetic, really, James. How did you see that horrible collapse after such a good start?
From an England point of view, it's one of their finest collapses. We do collapses very well in this country, and it was a stellar collapse from a position of strength to a position of immense weakness, really. A very narrow first innings lead in the end. Alex Lees and Zach Crawley, Ollie Pope as a top 3. We've spoken about it before. The jury, I think, is very much still out on all 3 of them. Alex Lees, I think it's best, particularly in the second innings, showed a little bit of fortitude, but then a massive misjudgment. In the first innings, he looked like his brain was whirring. I mean, I think people forget sometimes. We look at these guys out there as being cricketers and just expect them to hit the ground running and be fantastic. But for Alex Lees, who played his first 3 test matches in the Caribbean, in his head, probably to relative anonymity, because he's not in front of a big crowd and all the rest of it, suddenly lands in front of a home crowd at Lords. Since, from being a small kid, he'll have been watching Lords test matches. So I can understand why the juices were flowing inside his body in the first innings. But, he keeps getting to kind of 20s and 30s and then doesn't kick on. So if Alex Lees is going to make that position his own, he's going to have to go on and get at least a 50, I think, in this series. Zach Crawley, we all know he can play a fantastic cover drive. We all know he's punchy. We all know he stands tall and hits the ball hard. But I think particularly in the second innings, I saw his wicket coming in the second innings from a mile away, because he was just not moving his feet, not getting his head across in the line. And if you're a Tim Southee, a Trent Boult or somebody, a Carl Jamieson, they've all got tremendous control. If you stick that ball on 5th stump and keep it there, he's going to ultimately give you a chance. So Zach Crawley, jury's still out. And you said Ollie Pope didn't work. think it's too early to judge Ollie Pope at number 3 yet on one Test match, but early signs are it didn't work because to me, if you're batting in the top 3, Lucas, in a Test team, it's a specialist role. You're almost an opener. And Ollie Pope has got most of his runs at 5 and more latterly 4 for Surrey. You're protected then from that new ball. At number 3 for England, you have got very little protection above you. So he's going to be exposed at times, and he needs to show his worth, doesn't he? There comes a time, he's 24, I think now, he comes a time where the potential tag goes and he's got to become a fully fledged Test player. And this is his opportunity. And at the moment, he's not really showing too many signs of taking it. But the run out of Colin de Grandhomme was very good.
Yes, we'll get into that. Obviously, from the bowl, hang on, Michael. From the bowling perspective in that first innings, it really wasn't one dominance. They all chipped in. Tim Southee hit 4 wickets. Trent Boult hit 3. Jamieson hit 2. Colin de Grandhomme hit a wicket. They all chipped in. They bowled very well, Michael. Your thoughts on them?
Yeah, look, I was a little bit sceptical about Jamieson being in the squad. I would have probably had Neil Wagner there, but Jamieson made a real difference in that first innings in terms of he came in, he broke up the partnership. He got Crawley out, and then got Pope not long after that. Actually, it was a while after that, in terms of 10 overs later, but it didn't feel like there wasn't much happened in those 10 overs. Actually, 16 runs that were scored. But he and Boult bowled dry. They really put the pressure on, and de Grandhomme as well. But they really put the pressure on, and that was. I guess in some ways the ultimate, the comparison between the McCullum approach and the Williamson approach, where McCullum's about create a wicket with your field placings and you get in the batsman's head to create a wicket, whereas Williamson is about you build the pressure, the drip, 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 and make the batsman make a mistake. And it was that was very much a Williamson wicket, a Williamson bowling spell. That they did it just the way that they've been doing it in the series, or in this since Williamson took over. Just build that pressure, probe away, find the breakthrough.
You don't need a lot of pressure to put pressure on England. They crumble very quickly.
Well, I mean, but actually that's and part of that is that the English press and the English fans will jump on their players. And so there is that tendency that there is extra pressure on them. But, I mean, again, Southee, his ability when he's on to clean up a tail has been a really Southee and Boult, their ability to just mop up the tail is very handy. And so you saw England go from 96 for 4 to 100 141 all out. You'd normally expect half the runs to come in the first 4 wickets, and it was quite a bit less than that came in the second 4. So that's a useful thing, and that's something that New Zealand lacked when Broad wasn't there. That left right Southee and when Boult wasn't there. That left right combination just gets in the head of the lesser quality players, and batsmen know how to deal with it, but all rounders and tail enders just don't do it as well. And there's the little subtle things that they do, the change of angle, all of those tricks that they have do tend to play absolute havoc with the tail. And you saw it happen there. And there was a lot of, it was a bit of assistance from the pitch, but a lot of it was similar to in England's innings. There was a lot of the credit has to go to the bowlers. They made the most of the pitch and they put the pressure on the batsman, and the batsmen just weren't up to it. But it was natural for the conditions that they were in with such great bowling that their wickets were going to fall.
Well, James is actually right. In fairness to Ollie Pope, literally when you were number 3 for England, you're ready to come in after the first 3 overs. So in fairness to him, he didn't know what to do. He probably was having a cup of tea, didn't know whether to play cards or whatever to do. So my bad on Ollie Pope for that. Maybe I was a little bit harsh with him. I think Gaurav.
I do have to say though, just on that for his England's batting, in difficult conditions, the job of the opening batsman really is to make it to the end of the first hour. If you can bat an hour as an opener, the runs is secondary to that. If you can make it to an end of an hour, you've given everyone else a good shot. And both Crawley and Lees managed to bat out an hour as opening batsmen. And so you've got to say that's a win for them. Now, the fact that the rest of the team got from number 3 to number 11, the highest scorer was Joe Root with 11, is not really what you're hoping when you put on an hour-long opening partnership. Sort of expect that they're going. You've set up the platform. You've made it easy for them. They're now going to come in and score runs. But you can't blame the openers for what happened after they got out.
Very good point. Let's bring in Gaurav here, who wants to ask a question to Michael.
Hi, Michael. Just wanted to ask some of the questions regarding the team combination of New Zealand. Okay, so will Young continue batting at the opening slot, or Devon Conway will move ahead because he has batted on the last summer by opening and he scored some of the 100 in the test matches in England, obviously. And what about Ajaz Patel? Did Ken Williamson has messed up while using Ajaz Patel?
Okay, well, we'll get to Ajaz Patel in the fourth innings, I think. I 100% think that Kane Williamson lack of use of Ajaz Patel is the number one reason why, maybe the number two reason why we lost. 50 runs from the top 4 batsmen on both innings combined is probably the number one reason why New Zealand lost. If we'd even an extra 50 runs, that would have been a much harder chase. So if they had scored an extra 6 runs each, that would have completely changed the complexion of the match. But I think it certainly should have happened. In terms of the makeup of the side, Will Young's got a pretty good record as an opener. Devon Conway, I mean, look, in domestic cricket, I'm talking. Devon Conway averages about 30 as an opener and about 70 as a number 4 in domestic cricket. So would you move him from the position he's best suited to play, where he's quite clearly the best option at number 4, to opener where he's probably not the best option? No. But I would not even consider that unless there was an injury.
But he has scored 100 in the last summer, if I'm not wrong.
Yeah, look, he has. He's been successful as an opener on occasion, but he's a middle order batsman who filled in as an opener rather than an opener that's moved down the order.
And what about Will? Yeah, go ahead, Lucas.
Go ahead. Yeah, I was going to say, well, that's the problem with everybody that comes from 3 or 4. If they open and they score runs, you get this problem. In a way, it's a good problem. It's not a bad problem, but you get this problem thinking, well, gee, where are we going to put him? We're going to keep him opening. Okay, as Michael just said, his best position is number 4. Do we put him back to 4 where he thrives in domestic cricket, or do we keep him at 1? That's a conundrum that's very hard to solve. But yeah, go ahead, Gaurav.
And what about Daryl Mitchell? Because if Henry Nicholas is fit for the next test match, will you drop Daryl Mitchell? I think Callan de Grandhomme is also injured. So who will be playing?
The selectors may not have to make the choice, because if de Grandhomme's out, Mitchell drops down 1. Nichols comes back to 5. Mitchell has to do a bit of bowling, but that's all. That's the situation, and that's not going to be a problem. If de Grandhomme's ankle just turns to be a sore ankle and he's fine to play, then there's a real question. I mean, de Grandhomme really adds something with the ball that Mitchell doesn't provide. And in terms of the batting, Mitchell's a little bit better than de Grandhomme, but not a lot better. And de Grandhomme does have the ability to rip a team apart that no one in world cricket has like him at the moment. There's no one else that you can genuinely expect that it's not unrealistic to expect Colin de Grandhomme to score 80 runs in a session. That's what he does actually. If he bats for a session, he's almost always got 70 or 80 runs from it. Not many players do that now. And so that's there's an X factor with de Grandhomme that he can win you games that in ways that not many others can. So it's worth the risk to carry him. So then what do you do with do you pick Henry Nichols? Do you pick number 6 batsman in the world, averages roughly 100 against pace bowling in the last 4 years? Or do you say, well, he's got a bit of a weakness against spin. If Leach is fit, there's a bit of a risk playing Nichols, so you pay Mitchell, but then, look, it's a good headache to have. There's other headaches that are much worse to have than which one of these successful, well-performing batsmen are we going to pick.
And one question to James Butler also. Who will England find the number 3 position for the batsman? Who will bat at number 3 and continue? Will England back Oli Pop, or do you find someone else will batting at number 3? And same, and another one is, who will Mark Pakistan will be playing the next test match, or will you find Jack Leach will be pitting in the next test match? Go ahead, James.
I think in terms of the batting, I think England will keep it exactly the same. I think the fact they've won probably gives them that excuse as well. And they picked the squad. I'm going to mute Lucas. They picked the squads for the first 2 test matches. So the options aren't particularly plentiful. They've got Harry Brook, obviously, in that squad. A lot of people crying out for him to come in because he's been in incredible form in domestic cricket. But I think... the way I see it, anyway, is that McCullum's basically just put his England tracksuit on. Ben Stokes is only captain now in that in the first Test match as a full-time captain. I think they're going to be. I was quite impressed, actually, just on a side note, with McCullum and his movement around the balcony. He seemed to be very good at going and sitting next to somebody who maybe needed a shoulder to cry on, or he was obviously trying to find out and chat to players that might need a bit of confidence boosting. There's a few people from inside the England camp have already said they make them feel, he makes them feel 10 foot high. He's given them a little bit of a bump. And you could see in the field, actually, in the first innings, England were on it. The catches they took, some of the fielding stops and stuff is very unlike England over the last 2 years. They were really, really taking everything. And I think McCullum's had to, he's energised that team to a degree, because the team was a little bit down after the last 18 months. But I noticed when Crawley got out, he went and sat next to him. When Lees got out, he was sat next to McCullum, and he was just having a little chat with them, talking them through it and getting their opinions, and presumably learning about players that he doesn't know too much about. A couple of weeks ago, he probably never spoken to any of them. So that was interesting. But I think in terms of the batting order, as I say, I think they'll keep it the same. From what I've seen of McCullum elsewhere, he tends to, he hasn't got a huge CV for coaching, it has to be said, but he's been in the IPL and the CPL. But whenever he's gone into those places, and I know you can't make massive changes because you've got your squad and that's it, but he has tended to have stuck with the 11, kind of gone in there, sat back and viewed and admired and criticised maybe from a distance. And then once he's actually made his mind up after observing for a while, he's then made some changes. And I think he'll do the same with England. I think for this series against New Zealand, I can't see too much happening. And then maybe against India and South Africa later in the summer, then McCullum might start to stamp his own authority on that side. We've got rumours as well that Ian Bell might become the chairman of selectors, or whatever the tag will be there. So this a completely new hierarchy that England have. And I think they'd be wise to not listen to people clamouring on social media for the likes of Ben Compton and stuff, but to just give these guys a little bit of time, see if anybody steps up to the mark. If they don't, then they can start to tinker. If they do, then there's some good players in there. Ollie Pope's a good player. He's just not getting any runs for England. There's a mental block when he steps into an England shirt as opposed to a Surrey shirt. And McCullum, if he's a great coach, then he might be able to unlock that block and clear it away so Pope can thrive. Because there's a lot of comparisons with between Ollie Pope and Ian Bell, and Ian Bell wasn't a bad player. And if you actually put them side by side and watch them bat together on a split screen, they're very, very similar.
Just wanted to ask one more final question to Michael about the Brendan McCullum appointment as an England coach. What do you see? Obviously, you have followed Brendan McCullum career very closely. So, what do you think that he will be bringing out to the England's this test team? And what are the more because you have seen, obviously, he hasn't done any kind of a coaching for the national team. He has just retired from the T20 leagues probably 2 or 3 years ago because he was playing all over the leagues around the world. So about the Brendan McCullum appointment, because a lot of I think currently Tom Latham has just pointed out that he was quite surprised after the appointment.
Yeah.
Look, so what's your take on that?
Yeah, look, I know Brendan a little bit, so I have some. I've sort of hung out with him a couple of times, and I really like him. So part of it is it's really hard to criticize someone that you like. But I do feel like it was a very brave decision to pick him as a coach because of not having any red ball coaching experience. But he does have a lot of captaincy experience in Test cricket. And I think there's a point where there's a lot of crossover between coaching and captaincy, more so in cricket than probably any other sport. There's a couple of things that I think people don't realize about McCullum, in that he's very much a fan of people learning how to play their game as well as they can, rather than trying to make people play his game. So the style of McCullum is to back players in the way they want to play, rather than to make them all go bish, bosh, bash. So he will, like you see with Crawley, he's encouraging him to play the shots. Whereas with Lees, you'll see him you'll work on him on leaving the ball and work with him on making those decisions. And I mean, McCullum actually did become a pretty good dour opener for a while. He averaged something like 50 over 3 years as an opener at a strike rate in the 30s. So he does actually have that ability to play that sort of game. He got bored doing it and gave it up, didn't like it. But he can do that. He can play that style of cricket. So it's, what he will be doing is, I'd say, trying to bring out what the natural flares of the players are. And I can't see him dropping anyone, except if he really decides he wants to bring in Harry Brook. And
Go ahead, James.
There's a call for that. And from one of the things I got to spend a bit of time with Brendan talking through the promotion of Kane Williamson when Kane was first coming into the side, and he said he said it's our responsibility. We get to decide if Kane Williamson is the best batsman that New Zealand's had since Martin Crowe, or the best batsman New Zealand's had. He said that comes down to how well we manage him, and that we don't put too much pressure on him. We allow him to develop his game. So he thinks that way. That was in 2012 when Williamson was first breaking onto the scene. He'd seen enough in him to say that's what we need to be doing. And he was supposed to be on a rest day. He jumped on a plane, paid for the ticket himself to get to the West Indies early, because he heard that Williamson was going to be given the captaincy. And he said there's no way he should be given the captaincy when he's still 21 years old. He should not be captain. There's too much pressure to put on his shoulders. And he got there early in order to take the captaincy off for that game, so that Williamson didn't have to step up and do it, because he didn't think it was right for him to have it early. So the thing with Harry Brook is he may well say, we just want to give him some time in the environment, get him to the point that he feels like he belongs here. But he's very keen on not putting too much pressure on someone too soon. So I think those are a couple of things that you're going to see with his captaincy. He does, his coaching, he does have faith in players. He won't drop someone after one or two bad performances. You've got to have a string of bad performances. And he was, I know that, he's a very big one for judging players by how well they train and the attitudes they have, as well as just their performances on the field. So you won't always see, although he does talk about net tigers. There's a term he used, someone who's great in the nets and rubbish on the field. But he said that, that's one thing he will be watching for, is the attitude off the field will make a big difference in his selections. So sometimes some of the decisions may be surprising based on stats, but he's not looking at the stats. He's looking at what they're doing off the field that he thinks is going to contribute to what will happen on the field.
That was what I was always like. I was always good in the nets and never any good out in the middle. I think from what I'm picking up from various people on social media in England is that the Rob Key, Stokes, McCullum axis of triangle of power, they've all talked kind of about positivity, and a lot of people seem to be interpreting that as being recklessness and going out there and hitting fours and sixes all the time and playing like T20 cricket in the Test match arena, and match is going to be over in 2 days kind of thing. But that's not what positivity, I don't think, in cricket means. It's about, as Michael said, getting the best out of yourself, trying to kind of get negativity out of your brain, not being scarred from previous experiences, but thinking positively about the future, looking for how to win rather than how to draw, and looking at how to draw rather than how to lose. And you can, I think in cricket terms, you can actually play defensively positively. You can leave a ball positively. You can do things positively with the right body language and with confidence, rather than, as England, I think, have done over the last 18 months, have played with a little bit of a fear of failure at times. And as Michael said, the press in this country and the supporters in this country are not shy of telling people they're rubbish. I mean, Matt Parkinson's a great example of that. For the last 2 years, Matt Parkinson's gone twice around the world in England squads. He's been sitting in the dugout. He's been carrying the drinks with a bib on. And over the last, probably, the cries have got louder for Matt Parkinson to come into that Test side. Everybody's been saying that. He bowls 14 overs after being called up as a late substitute concussion change, and all of a sudden he's rubbish because he hadn't taken a wicket. And that's just typical of how you've got to, like Matt Potts. Matt Potts escaped any criticism because he hit the ground running and took wickets straight away. But if he'd been wicketless on day one, they'd have been saying, what are we calling up this second division trundler for? People have very short attention spans for people's abilities. You've got to let people settle down. It's a big step up into the international arena. And there will be nerves in Matthew Parkinson. It was great to see him take that final wicket to kind of notch one to his tally. I don't know. I mean, just going back to Garav's question of earlier, which I missed at the time. I don't know how Jack Leach is after his concussion, because there are obviously rules about concussion. I don't know if the medics will have looked at him, and if it's full scale concussion, I think you have to sit out for a while. You're not allowed back on the pitch. So I don't quite know how severe it was, but going to be interesting actually if Jack Leach reports fully fit, who they go with. Because I mean, Matt Parkinson was on a hiding to nothing really. Yeah, no leg spin has really done a huge amount at Lords. It's not that kind of track. He probably would actually do a lot better at Trent Bridge, where leg spin may have more of an effect. So it's going to be interesting to see how the selectors go with the spinners role.
Well, he also, I think, was given a bad bowling plan. You're bowling to guys who are both pretty good off their pads, and you're bowling outside leg stump. That's not an ideal place to be bowling as a leg spinner.
Well, one thing, Michael, that England have got very consistent with is having captains that don't know how to captain spinners.
Well, it's something New Zealand and England have in common. But you want to, as a leg spinner on a track that's doing a little bit but getting quite a bit of bounce, which is what Lords was doing, you really want to be bowling a middle and off sort of line. And while that seems negative because you're moving away from the stumps, it brings your wrong in and your top spinner and your flipper and any of those sort of deliveries come into the game.
And the other thing, Michael, as well, at Lords with the slight slope as well. I mean, it's not obviously across the width of the strip. It's not a massive slope, but you only have to go to the ground to know how much higher one side is than the other. That obviously complicates things as well, doesn't it? Because you've got the slope actually, either accentuating some spin or negating spin.
Yeah. But again, what you need to do is you need to create doubt in the batsman's mind if they need to play it or not. And if you're pitching it outside leg, there's no doubt for them. The doubt is, do I try and hit it for four or do I just pad it away? That's the only decision they've got to make. Whereas when you're bowling on middle and off, Richie Beno would say middle, but I think most modern spinners, it's more closer to off that works for them. If you're bowling there, you've got the I can't leave this. Because it could be a wrong end. I can't play the inside the line because it could go straight on. And so I have to follow it. And that's where you lead the ball into the slips and that sort of thing. And we don't see enough of that because of, I guess, in some ways, leg spinners aren't used enough in 4-day cricket. They tend to only bowl in T20s. And because they're so useful in T20s, the art of bowling leg spin in red ball cricket is something that you're not seeing as much of nowadays as we did for a while.
I think with England, we've had Adil Rashid recently, obviously, pivotal to the one-day side, but not really trusted in red ball cricket. Salisbury, Schofield, and there's been a few. Crane, who played one test in Australia. Somebody came back at me after I said, "Look, just give Parkinson a little bit of time. He might not be the answer. He might be the answer, but at least give him more than 14 overs to actually show what he can do." And they came back and said, well, there's no coincidence. No leg spinner in England has played more than 10 test matches since 1820, whatever. But that is probably part of the problem because they don't actually invest and show any confidence in them. And as soon as an excuse to drop them, they get rid of them.
Eddie Hollings was probably the last one.
Yeah, but as any bowler, I mean, probably more so a leg spinner than anybody, you need to have a captain that shows a little bit of confidence in you, knows when to use you, knows how to protect you at times, and knows when to throw you in and say take some wickets. You got to. I mean, I know Rash personally, and he's somebody that needs to feel loved and part of the side, and I don't think he ever got that in Test cricket.
Well, we'll carry on from the second innings onwards. New Zealand came out to bat their second innings, and once again, Matty Potts was unbelievable. James removed Kane Williamson, removed Tom Latham. Fantastic piece of bowling, and it looked like New Zealand were going to collapse yet again. This could be the world's shortest Test match inside 2 days.
I mean, I know Kane Williamson hasn't played Test cricket since November, and he's a little bit rusty, and he was a little bit rusty, but the having him in both innings on your debut isn't too bad. I mean, in 5 years' time, 10 years' time, or in 50 years' time, when he's got his pipe and slippers and he's saying, my first, I got Williamson out in both innings, nobody's going to care what the situation was. That it's a major scalp twice, isn't it? But England, I thought, did reasonably well. But I think where England, they came out quickly, and they put New Zealand under immediate pressure, and again got the top order quite quickly. But the Mitchell-Blundell partnership, and we'll come on to England's, Joe Root in the England second innings, just shows you that wasn't actually a bad batting track. It might have been a little bit slow, but if you actually batted well, if you knew where your off stump was, if you showed some perseverance, if you treated it like a Test match, you could stay in and you could get runs. And Blundell and Mitchell did that for New Zealand. And for a long time in that Test match, it looked like that partnership was going to take the game away from England. They really played well. I felt for Blundell when he got out for 96, he didn't get quite on the honours board. But Mitchell did do, and you could see what that meant to him in his celebrations. Quite wild celebrations as he punched the air and went bonkers in North London. But yeah, I mean, it was a very interesting innings. But I mean, Gaurav might come back in this one, but I was very critical of when England played in Ahmedabad, and the pitch was breaking up on day one, and you could see the ball actually kind of creating dust and powder and breaking the surface on day one. And I said that was a bad Test match track because there was no way that track was going to go 5 days. A lot of Indian supporters on Twitter were coming back at me and saying, look, 17 wickets are fallen on day one at Lord's. How can you suggest that that's a good pitch? You're a hypocrite, blah, blah. That was a good pitch. What you can't do in England, do anything about the overhead conditions. When the ball's swinging around, that isn't anything to do with the pitch.
No.
Just get that off.
Yeah, 17 wicket on a first match. On the first day of the match, 17 wicket.
Yeah, it's the movement in the air, Gaurav, and it was also terrible batting at times.
Yeah,
I think pitches get
better in England after the third or the fourth day, right? Just like in New Zealand.
Well, I think the pitches stayed the same all the way through. It's just that in England, as opposed to in India, the overhead conditions in India don't make much difference. In England and in New Zealand on occasions, when the cloud comes over and it gets humid, that ball swings, and you get that in the hand of somebody like Jimmy Anderson that knows what to do it, or as you would call him disrespectfully, Clouderson. You basically start to, he has it on a string, and he gets the edges and he takes wickets. 17 wickets fell on day one of that Lord's Test match because of bad batting and because of the overhead conditions.
And I think part of it's also the new ball.
Yeah.
If you look
the new ball was massive, Michael, wasn't it, in this Test match? It took loads. Yeah.
If you look at the new all 4 innings, the new ball was really 3 of the 4 innings. The new ball was, it was 36 for 5 after 20 overs in the first innings. 36 for 5. Then you look at the second innings it wasn't quite so. The second innings, England did really well in that. But then the third innings, it was something similar. I did have some notes where it was roughly 50. It was 56 for 4 after 23 in the third innings. The fourth innings, it was 69 for 4 after 20 overs. So, I mean, there's more runs scored. But again, 4 wickets, 5 wickets, 5 wickets, 4 wickets, 4 wickets. And then the rest of the innings, the batting was it was reasonably doable. So there was it was 23 or 24 overs that England lost 2 wickets in the first innings. And after that, in that first game, it was the second innings, England's first innings. there was, the collapse happened later. But in the rest of them, it was really the first 20 overs is where the wickets fell. And then after that, it required a lot more skill, it was much more difficult to get the wickets. And that's the new ball was massive. And you had to capitalise on the new ball, and you had to bowl really well after that. And
that's why, Michael, as well, I thought England's chase, Joe Root was very conscious. I think there was a second new ball coming. And they scampered and they ran every run. They made sure they knocked off those runs, actually, in the end, just before the new ball came, because they knew if the second new ball came, England had got a long tail. Potts at number 8 isn't really a Test match number 8. Broad, Anderson, Parkinson are rabbits really these days. So if England had lost, if that partnership between Stokes and Root, or the partnership of Folkes and Root, had been broken a little bit earlier, and New Zealand had got into the tail and the new ball had then been available to them, that could have been a very different end to that test.
I was thinking about a schoolboy game that I was coaching on the field next door to, so I wasn't involved with the team, but a team, it was chasing 193 and they were 191 for 5 and they lost the match. They lost 5 wickets in a row without getting a single run. And it can happen that when you get amongst the tail, things go horribly wrong really quickly. It took 4 overs or 5 overs without them scoring a run and losing 5 wickets too. But panic sets in, and that could have happened. So it was the right move to do. The other thing that was a massive factor, and again, I think it's a bit of a McCullum thing, is they shook Williamson's confidence in using Ajaz Patel with hitting 4 sixes off his bowling, or 3 sixes off his bowling.
Ben Stokes was, I mean, the first shot he played against him was an attacking shot, wasn't it? He played a sweep and missed it, and then the second shot he played a slog sweep and put him into the stands, and that was definitely predetermined there. They were determined to make sure that Patel couldn't set, because particularly with de Grandhomme off the pitch, because what Colin de Grandhomme had already started to do in the second innings and can do for quite a long spell is just go along at 1.5, 2 and over and stock at one end and allow the other seamers to rotate. But with de Grandhomme off, Patel was the man that they were hoping was going to do that, and Stokes took him out of the equation, didn't he?
Well, I think more than that, Ajaz Patel has, in domestic cricket for New Zealand, cleaned up sides time after time in the 4th innings, even on green pitches, on pitches where there's plenty of life. You still, where it's been a quick bowling pitch, all of a sudden Patel comes in and rips the team apart. And I mean, he was the top wicket taker, I think, 3 years in a row in the Plunket Shield. That's despite playing on New Zealand pitches that don't turn. So you give him a proper 4th innings, day 3.5 pitch. It was turning. He was getting some movement. He beat the twice in 2 overs, but Williamson got spooked by a couple of sixes and took him out of the attack.
If he's, I mean, obviously, I think I know him most for getting 10 wickets in innings, and I haven't really seen too much of him. But if he is that good, why is he in and out that New Zealand side so much? Well,
part of it is that the type of pitches that you get in internationals in New Zealand don't offer much for spin. Part of it also is that we have 4 very good quicks, and with Neil Wagner being so good with the old ball, they don't generally give Neil Wagner the ball until over 40. And that's a deliberate thing because he wrecks them. You give him the ball that stops swinging for everyone else because he bangs it into the pitch. Because of that, because Wagner takes those overs, there's not really a space for a spinner in New Zealand conditions. With the Kookaburra ball, the Duke ball doesn't work so well for Wagner's what he does. It doesn't give you the variation and bounce that you get. It swings and then it just goes straight. You don't get the up and down that you get with the Kookaburra. So you don't get the wickets with the old ball. It doesn't work as well for what Wagner does. So he's not such a weapon in England, or wouldn't be in the West Indies either. So at that point there you think, well, if that plan's not working, then you go with the other plan, which is having a spinner who's a very handy bowler. But yeah, in New Zealand, probably Wagner's your better option as your old ball bowler.
Okay, the fourth innings. Actually, Mike, we'll get your comments on Mitchell's innings. Fantastic innings, absolutely superb. I like James said, I do feel sorry for Blundell. He deserved 100. well. Unfortunately, Steve Smith knows how Tom Blundell feels because he removed Steve Smith in Adelaide when he was on 90 or something along 94, 95, I think. So I understand Blundell's pain there, and Jimmy has the habit of getting players in the 90s. So just your thoughts on Mitchell's 100 and Blundell's innings.
Oh, look, I mean, outstanding. They had the conditions to favour them. In some ways, the pitch had flattened out. The bowlers were a little bit more tired. The ball had gone a bit soft. But you've still got to make the most of it. You know, it's one thing to say, oh, yeah, the conditions work for them, but the conditions work for everyone, and not everyone scores 100. You know, so they did it. They did well. And it was a good innings. You know, it was the sort of one where your team's in trouble. Again, Blundell hasn't really been someone that scored those runs. He's been like de Grandhomme. He scored the runs when the team's on top, and you're wanting to put a team away. He's been good at that. That's been more a BJ Watling type innings. The team's in trouble. I'm just going to bat and bat and bat and bat. You know, you're not going to get me out. That was really not Blundell's game, but he did really well with that. And it was good to see. And then we got to a point where, you know, you'd say with a 240 run lead with 5 wickets in hand, we were 90% chance to win that game. Well, and then the team metric, and it was all over.
Before we move on to 4 things, we were going to say we're absolutely dominant. We were looking like we were going to make 350 lead. And then Stewart came in and does what Stewart does and just breaks hearts of opposition. Yeah, go ahead, James.
I was on commentary, Lucas, and I'd actually said that I actually didn't think Stewart brought a ball very well, and I was kind of starting to say he looks a little bit rusty. I thought he'd been not as threatening as Potts and Anderson throughout the rest of the Test match, and then obviously commentators curse or commentators looking stupid. He comes on and that over happens, and the ball that got Mitchell. I mean, Mitchell was starting to play with serious confidence after reaching 3 figures. He was striking it around beautifully, and it went straight through him and was caught behind. And then I thought the Colin de Grandhomme dismissal, Ollie Pope's throw at the stumps, was another example of England being quite on it in the field, because the temptation sometimes is to just be watching the batsman and let the ball trickle to you and not really be aware of the situation. But Pope swooped in and threw the stumps down. But I thought de Grandhomme went to sleep a little bit. You know, he allowed that to happen. But then to get Jamieson first ball bowled and as you know the team hat trick, that changed the game. That was a huge 3 balls in this Test match. I mean, you sit there for 3 and a bit days and watch the entire game unfold. But those 3 balls of many balls in that Test match made a huge difference to it, didn't they? Yeah,
absolutely. I mean, the de Grandhomme one, I think not enough credit's going to has gone to Pope for that, because that was an incredible act of both awareness and then skill to hit from that angle. You know, you're seeing maybe 1.5 stumps from there. You're picking it up on the move and throwing down the stumps in one action. And you know what? He was 2 inches short. You know, that was. But yeah, so the 2 people that needed to get credit for, the other one that didn't get enough credit for was Stuart Broad. That was a good bit of bowling that got the batsman off balance. It was because he was, it didn't do what he was expecting it to, that he brought his back leg round, got himself into a tangle, and then took him a little bit to get his composure back. And he's out. The first ball, it happens. I remember an opener that in a team I was coaching who left the first ball, went through the keeper, and he got stumped. He was standing outside his ground, didn't step back into the crease. Opening batsman stumped first ball off the fast bowler is not a great way to go. So threw down the stumps right back. But you've got to say that quick there. Yeah, bad work from the opening batsman, but also outstanding from the keeper to notice that. And that was the sort of thing. It really is. That was a fielding wicket more than it was the bowler got him in trouble. It was the fielder that executed really well. And I think there's an awful lot. I mean, the articles have been saying that Colin de Grandhomme cost New Zealand the match with the no ball and the run out. And I'm like, well, I think that's a bit harsh, to be honest. When your top 4 score 50 runs between them, you're blaming the guy that was the top scorer in the first innings and took 1 for 26 with the ball as being the guy that cost you the match. I think is a bit unfair.
First of all, he kept New Zealand in the match with that innings in the first innings,
Yeah.
didn't he, as well. I think the Pope, just to kind of go back to what Mike was saying, I think the Pope run out, it just was one of many, as I said before, one of many instances in the field. Bairstow's catching at the start of the innings. You know, how many times have you seen England shell one of those and the batsmen stay in? You know, some of those catches are terrific.
Oh yeah.
That first catch was absolutely outstanding. I watched it live and thought, no, he can't have taken that. He can't have caught that one.
I actually thought it was Crawley had caught it because the angle on the TV didn't make it look physically possible for Bairstow to have got across to it. But even the one that hit him in the chest, probably the easiest catch of the lot was the one he dropped and then dived forward to catch. You know, England were on it from ball one in the field.
Which we don't give them credit for, because in the Ashes they couldn't catch a cold, James. So they've
been absolutely horrendous. England have been dropping things. I mean, Root's been fairly handy at first slip, but apart from that, the amount of catches that have gone down, and you can never quantify it. It's like the conversation about keepers, which do you pick your best keeper and what have you, because you can never really measure the effect of taking a blinding catch or dropping a chance. But it's obviously better to take them. Catches win matches, as they say.
Yeah. Well, interesting. In terms of that catches win matches, I went through a bunch of series when I was single and had lots of time before I had kids, and kept the track of.
We wouldn't know that, Michael. We wouldn't know.
And kept the track of the catches. The number of catches taken didn't seem to correlate to results, but the number of catches dropped certainly did. It was more that dropped catches lose matches rather than catches win matches. It's dropping them loses it.
The thing is, when you drop them as well, obviously if you take a blinding catch like Bairstow did, the whole team's buzzing off the back of that. If you drop one, the team's shoulders start to slump, and you maybe drop the next one as well, don't you?
Well, the other thing, when you drop a catch, the batsman you've now got a set batsman rather than you've given him a life and he's now set. Rather than getting someone new in, it's not the same as bowling to a fresh batsman. It's why runouts are such a big factor too, because runouts tend to get out set batsmen. In one-day cricket, particularly, runouts are the team that gets the most runouts almost always wins the match. They're hugely important. It's that sort of thing. Yeah.
And we'll go to the fourth innings, England's second innings, mind you, within day three. And once again, a stunning collapse from England outside of Joe Root. You're thinking, oh, gee, well, it's the same old. I was getting ready to lick my chops there, James, and give it to you and say, same old England, nothing's changed. But once again, Joe Root was unbelievable, making that 100. Stokes, who you've questioned on recent podcasts with me, was unbelievable. Well, Stokes was unbelievable, taking down Patel. But really, the match was probably Joe Root. Another brilliant 100.
I thought Lee's actually batted as well as I've seen him in an England shirt. I thought he looked very in control of himself until the final over before tea, I think it was. And he obviously had decided that he was going to try and leave as many as he could to make sure he got to tea. And that obviously cost him with a piece of poor judgment. But England, off the back of that, lost 3 wickets for 15 runs. And he started to think, the wheels are coming off here. There's no way they're going to chase this total down to 277. And when it turned into being 69 for 4, the Bairstow dismissal was strange because he had a little bit of a swish at Jamieson. They had a few words in between balls. It obviously got Bairstow's hackles up, and he was starting to his brain was obviously going. He obviously tried to then belt the next delivery and got himself out, and he paid the price for that. So Bairstow, I think, contributed to his own downfall in that respect with a very poor shot, and probably got himself riled up. And you could see Jameson's celebrations off the back of that. He was celebrating the fact that he'd done the mind games on Bairstow a little bit. But from then on, I mean, Stokes came in, and Stokes' innings initially was very, very peculiar because he didn't look like he was in control of anything. He was leaving alone. He was edging up. I mean, we often see him advance a little bit to play a defensive shot, but he was his shot selection was very strange. He'd leave 5 balls outside of his off stump and then try and hit the next one through covers, which was a better ball through covers for 4, and miss it. And he was getting himself all kind of tangled up in his own head, it looked like. And I was starting to think, well, maybe the captaincy is just nuking his brain cells. But he had that huge let off. He was on his way, wasn't he? He was halfway to the pavilion, and the umpire's arm goes out because the grandam had overstepped. And it seemed to be that he came back in, regrouped. I think he benefited from the fact that Joe Root was at the other end, and Joe Root's quite an unflappable kind of fella. And Ben Stokes' mind was going at 100 miles an hour, and Root was able to maybe just diffuse what was a ticking time bomb at the other end. And in the end, Stokes actually kind of regained the use of his faculties, really. And we've already talked about the fact that he took Ajaz Patel down and out of the attack. But the other person, I mean, we'll talk about Joe Root. He's 115 not out. His first fourth innings test match century, his 26th century of his test career. Unflappable, just brilliant, absolutely brilliant. Past 10,000 runs now in international cricket. Coincidentally, exactly the same day, to the day, age-wise, as Alistair Cook when he went past 10,000 as well. Just a brilliant player. And, obviously, having worked at Yorkshire, no Rooty, and he's a lovely lad as well, so it couldn't happen to a nicer guy getting the success. He was nice to see as well when he walked out in the first innings, the Lord's crowd, off the back of obviously losing the captaincy, gave him a really big welcome. They recognised the efforts that he gave to the England captaincy, even if it didn't yield success all of the time. But just before I finish on that England innings, thought Ben Foakes, a lot of people, I've been crying out for Ben Foakes to be in that side for years now. He's by far the best gloveman of those that are deemed to be in test contention. I thought he kept really well in this match. Yeah, and one of the things that Ben Foakes actually does himself a disservice with, he takes some very difficult balls so easily that they don't look difficult to people that don't really know what they're watching. So people don't actually notice how good he is. But there's a couple of very good catches that he took in the match as well. But a lot of people come back to me and say, well, yeah, but Johnny Bairstow can average 15 more and Josh Butler can do this. Look at what he's just done in the IPL. That innings from Stokes, I thought, overnight. So, two parts of that innings. He really dug in last night to keep Joe Root company because they recognised that those two being there the following morning was huge. And then this morning he weighed up quite early. I think that there wasn't a huge amount of movement with the ball. Played a few more shots, was a bit busier. He's 32 not out. I thought was an excellent innings. And hopefully that just goes a little bit of a way towards some of these naysayers actually recognising the fact that this guy can actually bat as well as catch.
It was a BJ Watling type keeper's innings for me, and that's high praise from me. It was the sort of innings where it wasn't all pull shots and cut shots, and it was a keeper. Didn't do the sort of get square a bit when he was playing, but a keeper that was saying, right, I've got a couple of shots that I want to play, but I'm not going to give my wicket away. I'm gonna just play the shots that are going to work for me, and if it's not in my zone, I'm just going to let the bowler have it. That's fine. You're not going to get me out. I'm not going to give my wicket away. And it was, there was a couple of nervous moments, a couple went past the edge of the bat, but it was just good test batting. And
don't underestimate the pressure he was on as well, because he knows, you look at the scorecard. I mentioned earlier that the fragile tail that England have, he knows there wasn't a huge amount to come. So if he got out, that test match was probably gone. He knuckled down. I thought it was a terrific exhibition of concentration, discipline, and will to win. Very, very good indeed.
So England chased down that total after being, I think it was 4 for 63. In the end, they did it quite comfortably in the end, thanks to Joe Root, Ben Stokes, and Foakes. To the tactical side of it, Michael, this morning, Cole Jamieson bowled extremely well this innings, the second innings. Were you surprised he wasn't first brought into the attack today?
I could be wrong, but I think he bowled the last over of the day yesterday, so he couldn't bowl the first over. And so they wanted him to bowl from that end, so they had to bring Southee on for one over so they could swap him around. So I think that's what was going on there. That's why he bowled the third over of the day, so that they could get him bowling from the right end.
That clears up.
What I was surprised by, and I'm still absolutely staggered that Ajaz Patel only bowled 2 overs. I mean, it's like we could say, well, we threw everything at England except for our best bowler in these sort of conditions. Except for him, we threw everything at England. Except for one of our specialist bowlers that we picked, we only bowled 2 overs. What's the point in picking him if we're not going to bowl him?
Exactly. You might as well have picked you might as well have picked Neil Wagner, right? If you're only going to spin a two overs.
Absolutely. I mean, there's no advantage to having Ajaz Patel on the side if you're not going to bowl him. His batting's not that good.
The other thing as well, his fielding's not really good. He feels better off his own bowling than he does out in the outfield. So he was actually probably better off his own. He dived beautifully across to his left off off his own bowling. Then there's a few mistakes in the field from him.
Yeah, his fielding's not exceptional, but it's he's not a terrible fielder either. He perhaps had a couple of bad moments, but I mean, Kane Williamson had a couple of bad misfields as well.
There was one where he slid and he kneed the ball towards the fence and then had to chase it at about 60 yards, didn't he? It was not great.
Between his legs, another one too. It was, and I think that was probably New Zealand were a bit. I mean, look, Williamson just got off the plane from seeing his baby born. I can understand why his head may not have been quite in it, but I'd like to see a pretty big improvement from New Zealand's top 4. But I think Williamson's captaincy, I felt that. I do think his captaincy is much better than Tom Latham's. But
you said it on the previous podcast. Yes.
Yeah, I don't rate Latham as a captain yet. I think once he gets a chance to establish himself as the captain, where they work on the strategies, as opposed to a standing captain, he may well be much better. But I think there was some very poor decisions. Well, there was one repeated very poor decision of not giving Ajaz Patel the ball, and it may be that there was something that Williamson could see that we couldn't. But I know that Ajaz Patel, when he's played against Joe Root in the past, got him out without Root scoring any runs. He faced a couple of overs of not being able to score and then got him out. He got Ben Folkes out as well before. So he's got 2 bowlers that he's dismissed last time he's bowled to them, and he's not giving them a chance to bowl at them again. When you've got the pitch is turning, he beat the bat twice in 2 overs. You know that England are going to attack him, so he's going to create opportunities.
It's
bizarre.
James mentioned that it was predetermined by England, especially by Ben Stokes, even Joe Root went arm. Is that a reason why Kane Williamson did not want to bring him on? Because my point is that they should have brought him on earlier when England were down probably 150 to 160, not when they were 100. And when they went after him, like 20 was a 20. I think they took off for 16 off and over. That's a big amount of percentage of runs. That could have possibly scared Kane Williamson. But the point is, they did get out Stokes. And then to your point, he has got out Froese and he has got out Root before. So it is a little bit bizarre why they didn't come after him. But there could be an argument from Kane Williams' side that he didn't want to because they're predetermined to go after him.
Yeah, and it could be also the matchups thing. They know Root's good against spin. Keepers tend to be good against spin. So we'll wait until the tail's in and then bowl them against them. And there's also the fact that they're wanting to build the pressure. And you get the runs, you get a few quick overs, a couple of overs where you get 30 runs off 3 overs or something. The pressure's all gone. At that point there, you've now got rid of a lot of that scoreboard pressure. But what if he picks up a wicket?
I thought the time to bowl him was actually when Stokes was out. Stokes played a silly shot and got himself out. And Stokes was the one that was really showing any massive attacking intent. Root's just busy, he always is. Yeah. And Root's a very good player of spin, so he's Folkes, but Folkes was going to be fresh at the crease. That was the time, if you were going to use Ajaz Patel, to bring him back on when the pressure had gone, when Stokes, the man that had tried to take him down or had taken him down, had vacated the scene. You could have brought him back in there and just tried him for another 2 or 3 overs to see if that would have made any difference, I think.
Yeah, well, and the other thing is, Stokes is a left-hander. Left-handers tend to do really well against left-arm orthodox bowlers. More so than right-handers against off-spinners. It's probably the worst possible matchup for a bowler is left-arm orthodox versus left-handers. Once Stokes is out, you've got 2 right-handers there. So that it changes the equation.
So England, as I said, they did it quite well in the end. They won by 6 wickets inside of 3.5 days. But it will start wrapping at the end of the show. But just poor Collins had gone home, Michael. It's very harsh to say he lost him the test match, but he went from hero to zero very quickly with the no ball off Ben Stokes. We'll go to the hero part where he made that 40, that fighting 40. The no ball off Ben Stokes, and then getting injured. Just couldn't do anything right on that day, Michael.
Yeah, it was a pretty poor day. When you go from having been the top scorer and one of the best bowlers, and having been a real contributor with the ball, to then getting run out first ball, give an opposition batsman a life, and then have to walk off injured after 4 overs. It's not an ideal situation.
Come on, Colin.
Sure. But what it. You still look at it and you say net contribution wise, his averages for that match, he averaged 42 with the bat and 26 with the ball. That's not a bad outcome. If you can do that every day, you're going to win a lot of tests for your team.
I was just going to bring up what's your positives. You just brought up a positive there, so fantastic. But what were positives, Michael, for New Zealand?
Oh, look, Kyle Jamieson, great to see Kyle Jamieson bowling well again. There'd been some question marks. He'd been a little bit average against Bangladesh. South Africa as well didn't look so penetrative. So it was good to see that. Trent Boult bowled really well in the first innings. I thought it was good to see him doing that because he hasn't bowled a lot in tests recently. But and then Mitchell, Blundell, de Grandhomme, though that had been a real concern. 5, 6, 7. And the 5, 6, 7 all stepped up. They all had a good innings in the match. So you look at that and you say, well, that's a positive. But the overwhelming negative, there were 2: the top 4 and the lack of AJ Patel. And I sit here and I just can't figure out the rationale for not playing him.
But you can't. But nobody can blame Patel for that. Isn't that on Kane Williamson?
Yeah, absolutely, 100% on Kane Williamson. Yeah. Unless Patel was saying, I don't want to bowl, in which case he shouldn't be picked for the next test. But if he was there trying to get, give me a bowl, skip, and Williamson saying no, that's something they need to sit down and go, what's going on? That was not, I know that you're trying to build pressure and they're hoping to get a wicket and that's something, but your best wicket-taking option in a condition where the ball is turning but isn't doing anything for the quicks is a spinner, and we just didn't play him, and it's just dumb. It was just dumb.
Absolutely, I 100% agree with that. And James, the positives and negatives for that test match.
Positives were Ben Stokes gets off to a winning start. McCullum's off to a winning start. Ben Stokes has now a win as Test captain. He's only captained Red Bull once before, and they lost it, so he's kind of got rid of that because the likes of me would have been writing that. The negative is the top order, still the top 3. It's the constant discussion point for English cricket over the last however many years. Not been solved yet. It's really no further forward in solving it because even though Crawley got runs, he's always giving you an opportunity, and he does need to be more ruthless. I mean, even despite the fact he top scored in that first innings, he'd got himself in by that stage, and that's when you can really maximise your, get your team, be ruthless and go on and get a bigger score. So I'd still very much jury out on Crawley, Lees and Pope in the top 3. What's though massive positive? Roots obviously having relinquished the captaincy. I mean, knowing Rooty a little bit, he's just team orientated and cricket orientated. Ben Stokes is his mate. You could see just genuine. He was trying to help him, and he was dead keen for his mate to get a win under his belt. So there was no kind of ego in that. Kind of, I don't want this team to win because I'm not in charge of it anymore. He's not like that. And for him to get that century and to get past 10,000 runs and to get his first 4th inning century, all massive ticks. Ben Folkes behind the sticks and batting, massive tick. And Matty Potts coming into the side and taking 7 wickets fairly cheaply on debut. It's huge for him as well. I'm sure we'll see him again.
Yeah, and my positive.
One thing I did want to mention, sorry, as far as something for England, Joe Root scored 100 in the fourth innings to win a match. That's one of those milestone marks. You want to have done that in your career. If you're a great batsman, you want to have done that at some point. And Steve Smith hasn't done it. Virat Kohli hasn't done it. But now Joe Root has done it.
There's only 3 people ever done it at Lords, and there's been a lot of Test matches played at Lords over the years. Gordon Greenidge on one leg.
Yeah, and he did a big one too.
Yeah, and absolutely incredible innings from him. Nasser Hussain, as he was reminded on commentary, I was watching the TV stuff today. He was the other one, and obviously Root today. So in decent company there, and it's a fairly rare occurrence. The fact that Root's played as many Test matches he has done and hasn't notched a fourth innings century despite being such a good player. I mean, there are a few 77 not outs and things like that along the way where he could have gone on and done it if the game hadn't finished. But it's a notable milestone, I think, not today.
Yeah. And so it's
also,
one of those things you want to have ticked it off, and he has now.
Yeah, Michael brought up a very good point that Steve Smith has not done that. I don't think Virat Kohli's done that either. So literally these all-time great batsmen. Obviously,
I genuinely think, Lucas, I know I'm biased, but I genuinely think at the moment, over the last 2 years, Joe Root is the best batsman in the world cricket in the Test format.
Outside of Australia, I completely agree.
No, including Australians and including being in Australia.
Well, you do know he hasn't.
I mean, you can't judge Australians. They never travel. They don't go overseas, do they? They don't help people out in the middle of COVID. They don't travel abroad to play Test matches.
You see, Michael, I said to you,
remember that tour of Bangladesh? Neither does anyone else who's still alive.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I said to you, Michael, who bring this up. I told you you'll come at me because I've been out because when England collapsed on day 1, I was all over James Butler like rash. I was saying same old by England. I knew he was going to bring up these little sarcastic comments about Cricket Australia. And I have a feeling if we collapse against Sri Lanka, he's going to give it to me even more. So please do not do that, Australia. Do not do that to me.
Quick question to you two then. If Joe Root isn't the best Test batsman over the last 2 years, who is?
Well, I mean, over the last 2 years is a pretty small sample because there's been all of the COVID. And Joe Root's certainly been
it's not a small sample size for England because England have played a lot of Test matches in that.
Yes, but small sample for anyone else. I mean, Williamson probably averages more in the last 2 years because he's averages something like 100 at home. But I think you'd be hard pushed to say that he's been the best batsman because he just hasn't been playing. It probably is Joe Root. The only other guy you'd say is maybe Rohit Sharma. I mean, Rohit Sharma's been in pretty good nick the last 2 years.
Well, you can make your conversion rate isn't that good, 50s to 100. David Warner with his 90s and 80s are just as good. Hasn't made those big 100s like he did against England, like he did against Pakistan. Joe Root, made a double 100 in India, another 100 in Sri Lanka. It's hard to it's hard to disagree with James.
Another count, another count. I mean, Lytton Dust would be the other guy that you'd say would over the last 2 years has been exceptional.
Bangladesh, yes.
And I mean, we got to see quite a lot of him batting in New Zealand. Brilliant. But brilliant for Bangladesh, not so good for New Zealand fans watching him scoring.
Well, there you go. James gave us curveball, and we've answered that, James. So Lyndon Dust, Khawaja, Warner, if he can.
Ultimately, you've named a number of names, and you agree with me. The Root's the best.
They're all in the conversation, but Root certainly said so.
Yeah.
I mean, Root's been absolutely outstanding in the last couple of years, and this was a brilliant knock. It's hard to easy to understate how good this knock was because of you look.
Somebody described it to me on Twitter as an adult knock. Not a schoolboy innings. That was an adult Test knock, and that's not a bad way of putting it. I don't think
it's a bit like the knock that Steve did in Pune in 2018, where he made that 100 on that ranked turner. Australia didn't win that. Actually, they did win that Test match, but it was kind of similar to that innings that was in the first innings, where everything collapsed around him. Came out, batted absolutely brilliantly. So I'll go. This is probably the top 5 best Joe Root hundreds of all time that he scored.
I reckon it's probably it's right up there because
And
the thing with
top
Root,
5, James.
the thing with Rooty is that when he's playing like that, he doesn't really give the bowlers too much of a glimpse, because he gets across, he stumps the offside and nudges it through mid-wicket. He just deflects, he sticks it in the gap. He's so aware of where the gaps are. Ken Williamson leaves a gap at mid-wicket. He dances across to his off stump and punches it through there twice. So Williamson fills that hole, and then the next time he just steps away to leg a little bit more and glances it through point, or something, not nudges it through point. So he just knows where every single fielder is, and he just has so much time, and that's the hallmark of a class act, isn't it?
Yeah.
Okay.
And you see all of the top guys do that when they're on. You see Smith finding the gaps. You see Kohli just you move a fielder and he just hits it to where that fielder's just come from.
And it's bizarre, isn't it? Because you watch the likes of Ollie Pope struggling to score runs at all, and then how easy somebody like Joe Root makes it look. That's kind of the definition of class, isn't it?
It's also, I think, the mental game that once you're comfortable being there, and Martin Crowe talked about it, that it was much easier to bat once he knew that he belonged in Test cricket.
Yeah, I think that's what Ollie Pope needs. I've got no doubt Ollie Pope's a terrific talent. He just needs that mental breakthrough. If he can take that mental step up, he could score a lot of runs for England. He's just really struggling to find the step, let alone take it.
Yeah, well, he certainly looks like a guy that will average mid-40s, not mid-20s like he is at the moment. He looks.
But he's what you were saying. He probably looks fantastic in the nets, but he's not getting any runs.
Yeah. Well, I mean, New Zealand had Daniel Flynn for a number of years, who was the best looking. I mean, you watch Daniel Flynn, you thought this guy's going to be the next Bradman, the next Sangakkara, and he averaged 24 in Test cricket or something. And you just can't understand how does a guy that times the ball that well and sees the ball that and not score runs. And the reason was he scored he played 3 delightful boundaries and then hit the ball straight to a fielder and got out. And that's pretty much what he did every innings. And there you do get players like that, but I think Pope looks like he's got the goods to go on a bit more. And my battery's about to run out, so if I disappear, that's what's happened.
No, that's fine. I found it quite amusing when the Englishman said that Joe Root, best batsman, the Kiwi and the Australian, tried to change his mind very quickly, pronto. Very amusing that. Final takeaways, Michael.
Oh, look, for me, I don't think we'll see another collapse like that. I think we've had our 3 or 4 big collapses up front for the series. I think we'll see some more conventional scores. But the takeaway for me is, why is Kane Williamson not bowling Ajaz Patel? We went in. We only used 3/4 of our resources.
Okay. Well, that's a very, very good final takeaway, Michael. I completely agree with you on that. He's there to bowl spin. If you're bowling spin, as he said, he doesn't add to batting. Why is he out there? And James Butler, final takeaway for you.
I just think Test cricket is marvellous. It had a little bit of everything, that Test match, didn't it? Collapses, great bowling, some plucky batting, some brilliant batting, some great catching, drama all the way through. Each side was in it. New Zealand went ahead, England fought back. England went ahead, New Zealand fought back. There's very rarely series between these two nations where there aren't good matches along the way, whether it's white ball or red ball. And looking forward to the Test matches 2 and 3. And if Michael thinks he's seen the last of the collapses, he's not been paying attention to how England bat.
No, I'm not saying that we won't see any more collapses, but I don't think we'll see teams 4 down for next to nothing. Well, I don't think we'll see New Zealand do that too many more times. I think that's, we've probably had the one in the warm-up game and two in this Test. I don't think we'll see 2 more, and if we do, then maybe it's time to start suggesting that Will Young, or that we need to start thinking about personnel. But I don't think we're going to see another one of that being repeated.
Well, people do have their quirks in life, don't they? And if your fetish is collapses, then England's your team.
Oh, no, I think Pakistan's the thing. I think if you really like collapses, no one does it better than Pakistan.
Fantastic. Okay, and that concludes. Actually, since the Kiwi and the Englishman's here, how about that little interesting moment with Ben Stokes in the field where it deflected off his bat, and they all had a little bit of a laugh about it. Brought up the World Cup memories again. Couldn't believe it,
Memories
could
that
you?
do not need to be repeated. We do not need to talk about that moment, that incident. I did notice they gave him the correct amount of runs this time. Ended up at the right end.
See, you Kiwis and Aussies and stuff like that. What you don't realise is that hadn't happened. He'd have just hit the final ball for 6, and there wouldn't have even been the super over.
Yeah, I'm sure that's what would have happened.
Well, maybe they should have done the underarm. That would have fixed England right up.
You can say anything you like about New Zealanders and Englishmen, but they're not Australians.
Yeah. Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Well, there we go. That's a bold warning from Mr. Butler there. Any response, Michael? He's got nothing. You got him. Yeah. Go ahead. He didn't catch that. Okay.
He was agreeing with me. That was an anti-Australian comment.
Yeah.
Fantastic. Let's bid up on the Australian. That hasn't played test matches since January. Since April. But there's still hope for us. Anyway, that concludes our podcast. Follow Michael Wagner at Michael Wagner on Twitter and James Butler at the Cricket Badger, me 3-point Spanish King. And I must say it's been a privilege, guys. We had some great fun. We've just blasted the absolute crap out of each other. Thank you, Michael and James, for coming.
Pleasure.
Yep. Great.
Okay. Thank you. No problem. The pleasure was all mine. Trust me.
Right.
Thank you guys for watching, and we'll see you all next time.